Today, we're gonna make a workbench. When I started contemplating the idea of creating a YouTube channel 3 years ago, the very first video I imagined to post was about me building a workbench. That project never happened until now. Of course, I took inspiration from many other workbenches out there on other maker shops, and I decided to go with a very sturdy, split up, not so huge but still very heavy workbench. So I went to my local lumber store and bought a whole bunch of hard maple boards that I asked them to joint plane and cut into smaller pieces. So I started by observing and placing them together the way I found to look best to create the tops. After having them arranged, I started the big glue up. And I wasn't sure about how much glue should I apply, so I ended up putting way too much glue and that resulted in huge squeeze outs. But well, I prefer to have any gaps filled with glue than filled with air. I applied just a little bit of clamping pressure at first and then clamped some blocks with packing tape to the ends to try to level up the components, and finally went turning the rest of the clamps a little bit more until they were super tight. I collected the excess glue from the top side and allowed for about 24 hours before unclamping everything. Some boards had big snipes from the planer at the lumber store, so I had to replane them before gluing up the second half of the top. These pieces were a bit of a nightmare to move around as they were very heavy for me, but I managed a few ways to do it. I decided to make a basic longboard just by screwing 4 wheels on a piece of the thickest plywood I had, and of course these wheels are not ideal as they are terrible to move around and super weak, but that's what I had on hand and it did work in the end. Here I started working on the base structure and this time applied the right amount of glue. I wanted to get the best look possible from these boards, so I observed them carefully and kept the curly grain pieces for the bottom stretchers as they will be more visible than the top ones. I am not a huge fan of crazy wood grains and I would probably never make a piece of furniture for myself using it, but for a workplace I think it's nice to try it out. To join the pieces, I gave a shot to this Bedlock Pro joinery kit from Rockler. This jig can create loose tenon joinery just by drilling holes. It's a strong jig all made out of metal and can be used with several sized inserts. Here I'm using the 1/2 inch kit since it is the biggest one. It has these white lines which you can align with your workpiece, but the lines are a little too thick, so to achieve a better precision, I ended up aligning it always to the outer side of my pencil line. I wish I had a vise already to make this job easier. This is the 1/2 inch tenon stock that will fit the wavy shape holes I've just created. This kit also comes with a rectangular guide, so after drilling your holes, you can chisel out the remaining material and use your own regular shaped tenons. After making a dry assembly, I got a bit nervous because then I couldn't remove some of the tenons that were so perfectly fitted, so I recommend you sanding the tenons a little bit before jumping into the dry test. I made a rabbet just on the bottom stretchers in case I decide to install a shelf after the workbench is fully assembled, and I always prefer the router table because I can get a very clean finish. To secure the tops to the base, I will be making some elongated holes to allow for wood movement. Finally, it was time to glue the base, and yes, some of the tenons didn't receive glue on one of the sides because I couldn't remove them as I explained before, but I think it's gonna be just fine. I forgot to make the long stretcher mortises on one of the sides, and at this point I couldn't fit the jig, so I had to remove the backer piece and use a couple of clamps to secure it in place. Again, working out my muscles to bring these heavy animals up in the base. There was no way for me to join the sides of the tops, so I just ran the plunge saw to define a straight line and finished it with a hand plane. At this point I could finally cut the ends into passes and flip it over to make 2 more passes. It's time to install the quick release bench vise, and first we clean the protective grease a little bit. Then I extended the front face so I can actually insert the vise rods into something. I followed the instructions from this video, so I won't go into details on this one. Okay, so vise installation done, and now I can put the tops in place. The vise jaw needs to be flushed with the top, and this seemed to take forever. Somehow I didn't seem to be able to take thick shavings. Maybe it's because this is a smoothing plane? I don't know, but I adjusted the plane mouth to be as open as possible, and the blade was freshly sharpened and still not getting thick shavings. Maybe it's me not having enough force to push down the hand plane. Anyway, the next step was to flatten the entire surface and make both tops coplanar and leveled. And again, I followed a video from the Wood Whisperer on this matter. I went out and bought these pieces of steel because I couldn't find any perfectly straight edge that could work around here. So I built the same jig that Mark did on his video, but I added 2 stoppers on the bottom so I don't hit the metal rails with the router bit. I want to be able to use bench dogs and other clamping accessories, so I drilled a few 3/4 inch holes with this big boy using a scrap block as a template that I previously drilled vertically using my drill press. I also want to be able to move the bench around occasionally, so I got these strong casters meant specifically for that purpose. And the workbench is done for now. I still need to make the central piece, sand everything and apply some finish to give it some protection, as well as some other details that will get covered on a future video. Hopefully these anti-fatigue floor mats can help my leg and back problems from now on. As I made it the same height as my T-track table, I can actually get infinite clamping possibilities, which is so awesome. A big shout out to Rockler for being a great supporter and providing me a whole bunch of tools and accessories for this build, as well as to all my Patreon supporters. We just hit the first goal, so I guess that I got some extra work to do soon. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found some useful ideas and inspiration to build something awesome, and I'll catch you guys later.